In this episode, I hang out with Chris Hewish. He is the president of Xsolla, a company that, since its founding in 2005, is making it possible for anyone to run their own gaming business, just like they're one of the biggest companies in the world. Basically, Xsolla accomplishes this by providing the financial tools to game developers and publishers they need to operate and scale, no matter how big or small that they are. And you might be asking me, Nicole, where does fintech fit into this equation? Well, let's start with equity, because the gaming industry, a lot like fintech, is mainly male-dominated. And for example, women make up only 24% of game developers, but 45% of gamers in the US. So many women play video games. You have so few a hand in creating video games. And when we give access to financial tools like what Xsolla is doing, they really level the playing field to more diversity with game developers, and then, more different kinds of people like women to be able to actually create games for a diverse population. So in this episode, Chris and I get into community and how the gaming industry is really like the original niche community and the ways that fintech can help grow and scale this community. We also talk about democratizing access to different industries, right? I mean, fintech can touch every industry possible. And if we can leverage a strong community to be able to give, more access to building in different industries via fintech, then, we can actually get a hand in helping make the world a better place. So in this episode, we're going to talk through gaming first, but I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode with Chris Hewish. Enjoy. Chris, thank you so much for joining me on Humans of FinTech. I'm excited to talk about this because honestly, gaming meeting the fintech space is actually a topic I've been so interested in learning more about. And so I'm excited that we're working together so that I had the opportunity to do that and share that with my audience. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Nicole. And I really look forward to the conversation. It's an exciting intersection of two great industries. And, I'm happy to take a dive in there.
All right, well, let's do it. Well, before we get into all of that, I do want to first let my audience learn a little bit more about you. I firmly believe that our backgrounds and our passions and the things we experience throughout life have, an interesting way of leading us to this fintech space. I know I have my own unique story, but what is yours? How does one become the president of Xsolla, of a gaming meets fintech, company?
Sure, Nicole. So I've been in games my entire career. I've been very fortunate in that regard, where I was able to turn what was my passion, which was a passion for gaming and for creating, started off designing games and turned that into a career. And then along the way, found out that while I had this passion for the creative side of it, I actually had a real aptitude for the business side of it. And that took me on my journey, evolved from being a creator at companies like Activision, to going over to DreamWorks Animation to head up their interactive division, started to work more on the production and producing side, business development side, and really started to see the business from another new angle. And along that way, got into some marketing and helping games go to market, and then back into development, running some studios. So a real sort of journey through all the different elements of making games. And then that brought me to the doorstep of Xsolla. And yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess because you were so involved with all of these different pieces of how the gaming industry worked, is that where you kind of were able to connect the dots throughout your career and say, hey, there's a problem here where we're not giving enough access to financial tools for more game developers to create, right, more optionality in games and in the space?
Yeah, Nicole, I'll be honest, prior to really taking a look at what Xsolla was doing, I was very similar to many, many other people in the games industry. I simply wasn't really thinking about the fintech side of it, or, that piece of the business. I was really focused on the creative and the go-to-market strategies and working with gamer communities. But I never really had spent much time thinking about how do those communities actually engage with their games beyond sort of the tier one kind of, options of major credit cards and PayPal. And when I started talking with Xsolla, one of the things that really excited me about the opportunity, and it was kind of a light bulb moment, is I saw like, wait a minute, you work with over 700 payment options around the world. I know of like 4.
Yeah, I know.
What are you talking about? And
so true.
and that was just the real, kind of ignorant, side of me. And my eyes were really opened up to what we estimate to be about 40% of the gaming market globally is simply unable to transact with their favorite games through established third-party platforms or whatever sort of platform they may be consuming their game on, because most local payment methods, especially when you talk about sort of underserved or underbanked communities, their payment methods and options just simply are not integrated into these major platforms. And even if they may desperately want to transact and be part of that, they just simply are unable to. So when I saw that was a problem space, kind of, made me feel really ignorant at first and a bit guilty that I had taken that for granted. But then I really wanted to dive in. And that was one of the main reasons I came over to Xsolla, was to really lean into that, learn more about it from my own personal journey, continuing to learn all about the games industry from all angles. And this was a completely new angle for me.
Yeah, well, it's what makes me so excited about the fintech space in general. And I was thinking about this on my way to the studio, and it's just fintech is a space that can touch everything, right? It can really transform every industry, whether it's gaming or whether it's small businesses or even the creator economy. And I think you're right, though. We're like not as like, even as consumers going about our lives, we don't think about the part where fintech is like interacting with us all the time, from like getting on the bus and paying for it or like whatever it is. So yeah, I think there's conversation like around that, but also just around like the communities that are being built now that fintech is kind of making this like center stage shift into our culture. But how has that conversation or like that connectivity been then since you started at Xsolla, like kind of having these conversations around like, hey, if fintech can actually like transform this industry, like, is it clicking for people today and maybe more so than it was before?
It really is. And it is on a number of levels. It's starting to click for people on the obvious side, which is just reaching a broader audience, being able to really, especially as games start to sort of mature in established markets and companies are sort of forced, right, to start looking outside of their sort of core markets. They're seeing like the opportunity in these other territories around the world and what is actually needed to reach those players. But another area that's been really exciting for us over the past year, and when I say us, yes, of course, Xsolla, but exciting for the broader gaming industry, which is how a lot of companies are starting to, especially in the mobile space, are starting to look beyond just the app stores and the platforms and are going direct to consumer. And you also see this in sort of the creator economy where there's an opportunity there as well to go direct. So as these companies are starting to go direct to the players or direct to the creators, they're really unlocking significantly more revenue. And that's been a real exciting thing to watch.
Yeah. And that kind of makes me think about that, the role that Xsolla plays in also the user experience, right? Because I don't game nearly as much as I do, but I definitely watch my partner and he's into it. And, I have brothers, but I have in the past. And honestly, it is one of those things, just like anything, right? That you interact with, where if there is like one piece that is too clunky, I bail. I'm like, nope, this all of a sudden has become too difficult and I no longer want to do this or pay for this or, whatever. But we're also in a time where, that community aspect, like people are so engaged in, whatever creator or influencer or whoever it is that they trust or whatever game it is that they have built a community around, that they want to make those payments. But alas, right, if it's like too difficult, then I can only imagine like how much fall off, right? Or like how much revenue has been missed because something as simple as like payments wasn't just smooth enough.
Absolutely. And just for example, when I mentioned a moment ago about how mobile games are starting to spin up their own web shops or their own communities online, it's much more than just having a shop. It's, to your point, once you're able to engage commerce with community and make people feel part of something, they're able to actually generate significantly more revenue per paying user. Not only because the players are more engaged around the store, if it's in sort of a web environment where there's a sense of community, but also the companies are able to really start to lean into the power of e-commerce when it comes to bundles and promotions and special offers. And then you link that with creators, and you have your favorite creators giving special offers to their players, and you can do all of that when you are going direct to the consumer or direct to the player. And that, interestingly, is sort of a leveling up of game commerce that we haven't seen previously, because game companies, well, in the past it was through retail, and then it was through digital third-party platforms. So there really wasn't an opportunity to do a lot of this customized sort of offerings to a player that are also embedded in a much more social and community sort of environment.
Yes, but now it's something I think about often, right? Like, we have the maturing technology to help everyone win, whether it's the end user that is experiencing, the game or the payment, right? Or the developer creating it, or, the fintech provider offering it. Like, we have technology so that everyone can have a slice of the pie and have the experience that they, desire and want. And that is something that is like table stakes at this point, right? Like, you can't just have something exist, right? Even if these like developers want to create shops that are outside of the app store, right? It has to be like near flawless at this point, because the consumer expectation is so high, especially with that personalization, right? Like, gone are the days of just like a one size fits all strategy, especially in fintech. And fintech companies love to do that. They like love to just, in the past, right? Oh wait, we'll get together, We'll create one solution and it should work for like everyone, right? And it's like, ooh, no. So I'm sure you have some insight on that, because especially in something like gaming, it's so like, it is so personal, I feel, and so you've kind of had to work to like break some of those barriers as well, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I think one great example is the evolution of fintech and the awakening of game companies around like, hey, this is a muscle that we really need to develop some expertise in, and it can be better for our players and better for us. Well, one example is if you're in charge of your own sort of fintech stack, you can start to get the data around your players completely, and you can actually leverage fintech to help reduce churn. Maybe you see a player that is potentially going to churn out. Well, you can give a personalized offer to them, right? That not only is it personalized, but maybe the market they're in, and the pricing can be appropriate for that market to try to retain that user, right? And keep them in. And these are that's just one example of many, many things that you can do that really help to keep your player base intact, make players feel better about the games, generate more for the company. And it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
And it's also a win when it comes to the equity of really almost any industry, but, going specific with gaming. In my research on learning more about this, I did, learn like fintech, gaming is a largely male dominated space, with women making up 24% of game developers, but 45% of gamers in the US. So, women play video games, nearly like half, right, of users, but have a few hand in actually creating the game. So I think that's like another element of what's so cool about what Xsolla is and what you're leading here, because, you're giving this opportunity for more game developers, big or small, right, to say like, hey, like I can create this, or it's almost like storytelling, right? Like when you're creating like a game for someone to have an experience, you're like sharing your story almost in that creative process, which as you've been like a heavy hand in the creative side of it, I'm sure you've like felt that and experienced that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really like about Xsolla, what's kind of been our mission, is the idea of democratizing the business of gaming. And we want to be able to provide, and look, it's not just us, there's other options out there as well. So I'm not here selling just us, but I do love the fact that FinTech has evolved to the point where it can really level the playing field, where if you have a business, you can stand that up and do business sort of on par, or at least with the same tools that the big companies have. So for us, we look around and we see with the games industry, you have this great evolution of game engines to develop your games with Unreal and Unity and a host of other engines. You have these distribution platforms that reach massive audiences, all of this. Well, we like to say we provide a business engine that allows you, it's the same way you have a game engine, it can really allow you to conduct your business at scale and without having an army of people to do that. And to your point, that means that a much larger sort of section of or cross section of people can start to bring their visions to life, regardless of what their economic status is, their region, their gender, anything. If they have an idea and a voice, right, there are now the tools to bring that to market, and they can, it really levels the playing field.
Right.
And one of the things that we see is really beneficial for a lot of people is, especially if they have a good solid voice, is they can start to generate revenue before they've even launched a game by engaging with the community, using FinTech to bring in pre-orders and all of this. And it's just one more example of a way to help people get their voices out.
That's really cool. And I think it also lends itself to the idea of of trust, which is really the other element of creating the community. That is so fascinating to think about, being able, right, for say a smaller developer, which is basically a small business owner, if you think about it in a sense, for them to have to even be able to start to generate revenue before even launching something, or start to build the hype and do it in a way that maybe is that brings much more monetization and value than say trying to hype something on social media or that type of thing. Yeah, I think that's a conversation that just isn't talked about enough, that FinTech has this capability of actually being able to open up these types of doors. Yeah, which is just so fascinating to me. Is there a particular event that has illustrated all of these trends and changes that we're talking about that maybe makes you really go yes, Xsolla is it, and it's working, and it's and it's bringing that equity and to the space?
Okay, that's a good question. Is there a particular event? I mean, I think there certainly are some examples, and there's macro things that are happening. On a macro sense, just this past year, the number of companies that are really embracing the direct-to-consumer sort of ethos and evolving that beyond just, hey, I'm going to put a store online and I want people to go to the store. That doesn't work, right? That's just lazy, and it's not really going to work. So we've seen a lot of companies, and it's really accelerating, big companies, small companies, who are really putting up a presence online, regardless of the platform that their game is on. And they're treating it as a good sort of community hub, a good place to really drive the conversation, to develop one-on-one relationships with players, which I love. I've been a fan and advocate of that for a very long time. And to see the power of that in FinTech is really cool. That, yeah, if you have a good relationship with people, you can start to keep them engaged, understand what it is that they want, create offerings that are meaningful, right? And then that's just a win for everybody. So I think that's really, really cool. And then,
yeah, no, I love that. And so please share with us, Chris, some of the folks who have inspired you, because obviously entering FinTech in the gaming space isn't necessarily a conventional path if you think about it. So curious if anyone has helped inspire you to get into the space.
Absolutely. There have been a number of people. The first, and I know it may sound a little cheesy, but it's the founder of Xsolla. He was the one who, when I met with him and started talking about the business, he really opened my eyes to this whole world of FinTech. along with the team that he has around him, in particular, our head of commerce, Anton Zelenin. He knows payments and fintech inside and out. So he's been a really good sort of mentor for me in this space where I've been able to bring in the game knowledge. He's got a lot of the fintech knowledge, and it's been fantastic. And then beyond that, sort of an unconventional person that I look up to, who I think has had a massive impact, or potentially a massive impact, on the world of fintech and gaming, is Tim Sweeney. He's the founder of Epic Games, and he really has had the courage to stand up and challenge sort of what some consider to be monopolies with a lot of different third-party platforms. And these platforms are great. They have huge audiences, but he's really taken a stand to try to open them up to really democratize fintech across all of those platforms and shift some of the benefits and the power from the platforms to the actual game makers themselves, which I think could have a massive impact on fintech by really exposing the concept of fintech and the power of what you can do to all of these companies who, so far, it's kind of been obfuscated from them. So I think Tim has had a big impact and potentially even a bigger one over the coming years.
Yeah, I love that answer, because I think a lot of my inspirations, and I'm sure lots of listeners could relate to this, is that my inspirations aren't necessarily always people in the industry, but sometimes the best ideas or the best people or the best inspirations are from places that aren't a part of the industry that you work in. And I actually think it's so beneficial for the fintech industry to be filled with people that come from so many different spaces, even outside of just like finance or tech, because they have this like other view or other experience that they can bring into our space, right? Like sometimes the best idea you could ever have comes from an area you know nothing about, right? And so anyways, but it is also awesome to see someone that is so dedicated, right, to being able to like spread that power, right, if you will, to be able to say like, hey, like these are the tools and the things necessary that we can do. Because I also think that like the like concept of what fintech truly can be as like this very like revolutionary industry in and of itself isn't so widely known. Like that's still like a message we have to spread often.
Absolutely. And you're 100% right. I think when a lot of people think of fintech, they're still thinking purely of sort of a margin game. Like, okay, what are the margins on transactions and things like that? But it's so much more. And that's what's been amazing about working at Xsolla, is really having my eyes opened to what more it is. And what I mean by that is it's the ability to really get a deeper relationship with your customer, start to offer a much broader range of, whether just offerings, I know that's redundant, but whether it's bundles or packages or customized, things that you can give to players, just how fintech can unlock the ability to engage. This is more succinct. Fintech can unlock the ability to engage with your customers in so many ways. And through that, you generate not only a much closer relationship with those players, but much higher returns. And that's really where I think the power of it is. At least for me, that's what's exciting.
No, gosh, absolutely. And, it's funny because like fintech, right, starts with just the financial services industry in itself, and kind of circling back to even like us talking at the top of this conversation of like fintech touching so many different industries, and then like having this much more greater like impact to be able to really change, the world and level playing fields and all of that, good stuff that we strive for. But yeah, I think you do have to like intentionally, like it takes people in the industry to like intentionally be thinking about that, as opposed to, and spreading that message, right? As opposed to, right, it being like just this weird like extension of financial services that people can't necessarily trust, or like, I don't know, or, I even to this day, how many, people I have to be like, yes, you do use fintech. Like it's this, it is on your phone. You're using it all the time. Like, did you make any transaction today? But anyway, so I just think that when we have leaders, like the people that inspire you and, like yourself, that are spreading these messages, then we can start to see more of the adoption and the awareness and the especially in the different industries outside of just I use fintech as my financial tool.
Absolutely. Nicole.
Yeah. Well, I am going to ask a few of my final questions, some of my questions that I love to ask all of my podcast guests. So the first is to kind of be a little bit reflective, to think back at your career and how you feel about your current position in the fintech industry and having overcome all of the things that, an entire career encompasses. So with an emphasis on the positive difference between your current position and your starting point, what has been like the biggest takeaway throughout the career?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway throughout the career, I mean, gosh, there's so many. Nicole,
I know,
right?
there's a lot.
But I think, honestly, for me, the biggest takeaway has been just the power of having a two-way relationship with your customer, in this case with players. And when I began on the creative side, designing games, and young, full of ideas, and wanting to make kind of the games that I wanted to make. And fast forward many, many years, a few decades, really seeing how that really doesn't work. What really works is you have some creative ideas, you have a passion, you connect with a community of people that share that, and then you start to feed off one another. And of course, you're trying to bring your vision to life, but you really are trying to do it in a way that also captures what it is that audience wants, right? And somewhere in the middle, there's kind of a meeting up and a marriage of the ideas and the community, and then you start to really get magic. And I know some people don't necessarily agree with that in the gaming space. Some people do. I'm in the camp that really, really believes in that and sees the power of it, especially as games games and the technology has evolved into making what we call forever games now, right? Where it's not just you make a game, put it in a box, ship it, and you've got maybe an 18-month, sort of timeline on your P&L. Mm-hmm. But now you're looking at 10 years or more. And it really is about community and relationships. And I think that is just amazing. And that's where the power of fintech really comes in. It's like, gosh, if you're going to be transacting with some, a community for that length of time, you really should understand that piece of the business. And just as much as you understand the business of making a game and marketing a game, but the business of games, you should really understand.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I know a tough question too. But the two-way aspect of it, I think that there's, a common, almost like it's almost underrated for businesses to realize like you literally can just talk and listen like to I know it's like not mine. It's like nothing transform, like no, not like it's not new information. We all know that this is like a thing we can do. It's just people don't always do it. Communication in general in our industry and society is like something we could all work on. But yeah, so I just think that especially in the gaming industry is probably is like an OG community when you think about it. Like, yes, there's social media now, but like gaming was way, way ahead of its time when it comes to like the community element of like what you can do for niche markets and the products and offerings you can bring them. But anyways, all right. Well, one of my final questions for you, if we need to be the change that we want to see, what change do you wish to see in fintech and how do you embody it?
So the change that I really am excited about now is something I've mentioned a few times during our discussion, which is really that change of going direct to the consumer and going direct to the player. It may sound funny to talk about direct to consumer to a broader fintech audience because obviously that's been something that's been around for a while. But when you look at games in the gaming space, direct to consumer is a relatively new thing. Some companies have been doing it for a while, but by and large, it's a pretty new kind of concept. And I'm really excited about that because of the power of we talked about community and unlocking, getting people more engaged and involved. And that's something that we really advocate. That's what Xsolla is all about, is helping companies go direct. And so for me, it's really advocating for that. It's, helping people understand beyond just the technology of it. It's like, we can't just hand people the solution and say, here you go, plug this in and go off. But it's also helping people understand what are the best practices? How do we actually benefit from this? It's helping companies. I mean, this is exciting stuff. It's, helping companies realize, okay, if I'm going to go direct, it's not just about putting a page up online or getting this software. I need to build muscle within my company that understands it. I'm going from mobile user acquisition to a completely new type of user acquisition, and going from very targeted ads to maybe more brand related ads. And so helping companies evolve that way as well is part of the change that, I'm part of and trying to affect out there in the world.
Yes. And I love to see it. It's definitely something I'm a big advocate for. And it's one of the things, it's kind of in a way like one of the biggest things that will take our fintech industry to the next level and really help us touch all the different industries that, we can really change and grow and scale for the better. So final question. What can, as I live in New York City and the, and the sirens go by, tell us what we can expect from Xsolla next then, given all of the things we've talked about today.
Sure, Nicole. I think, what you can expect from Xsolla next is we're going to continue leaning into everything game companies need to go direct to consumer. That's a very pat answer. But beyond that, we're looking at what things are happening in the realm of games that can impact fintech and game companies will need. And what do I mean by that? Well, Web3, NFT, those are two big things. So we have a number of things that we're working on to tackle that area to help game companies go in that direction should they want to. User-generated content, creator economies. That's what I'm personally really fired up about. Just the whole idea of commerce within a creator community that goes beyond just the one-way transaction. Now you have two-way transactions of money in, money out, all of that. And I'm really excited to head in that direction. So we're working on a number of solutions to address that. And there's so much more, but those are the two big things.
Just a few things, like a couple projects on your plate. I mean, that's, that's awesome. I'm like so excited to see all of this scale and play out. And especially when it comes to, helping users be like and gamers be the creators that they are and share that content. And, you can help so much between education to just helping more people have like an enjoyable moment of their day when they play a game that brings them joy, right? Like that's so awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me on Humans of FinTech. This has been a wonderful conversation, so different than anything else I have done. So it is awesome to bring this to the readers and the listeners. So I appreciate you joining.
Well, thank you, Nicole. I appreciate the opportunity to join. This has been fun.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. To hear our next story from another diverse leader, be sure to tune in next week. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our show and give it a 5-star rating, as it helps our message reach more people who want to find belonging too. Thanks for tuning in.